Ethiopia, a land of ancient civilizations, stands as one of the most fascinating and unique countries in the world. Located in the Horn of Africa, it is a country with a history that dates back thousands of years, rich in culture and tradition. Known for being the only African country that was never colonized, Ethiopia has maintained its independence and cultural integrity throughout centuries of outside pressures. Its people trace their lineage to the biblical figure of Ham, one of Noah's sons, and this deep connection to ancient history forms the core of Ethiopia's identity. The history of Ethiopia is intertwined with the rise of Christianity in Africa. In the 4th century AD, Ethiopia became one of the first nations in the world to officially adopt Christianity as its state religion. This significant event occurred during the reign of King Ezana of the Kingdom of Aksum, who embraced Christianity after being influenced by Christian refugees fleeing Roman persecution. However, Ethiopia's ties to Christianity run much deeper than this official adoption. It is believed that certain Ethiopian tribes had been worshipping the God of Israel for over 3,500 years, long before Christianity arrived in the country. This early devotion laid the groundwork for the strong Christian identity that would define Ethiopia for centuries. Central to this identity is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which remains one of the oldest Christian bodies in the world. The Church has played a pivotal role in preserving not just religious practices, but also Ethiopia's cultural heritage. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's liturgical practices, unique theology, and the language of Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language, set it apart from other Christian traditions. The Church's influence on Ethiopian society is profound, extending beyond religion into areas like education, art, and social organization. The Ethiopian Bible is a cornerstone of this religious identity. Unlike the Western Christian Bible, which consists of 66 books, the Ethiopian Bible contains 88 books. This makes the Ethiopian Bible unique in the Christian world. It includes several texts that are not part of the Bible in other Christian traditions, such as the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Gospel of Bartholomew, among others. These texts, known as the deuterocanonical or apocryphal books, provide a much broader narrative of biblical history. The inclusion of these additional books reflects Ethiopia's distinctive theological and religious perspective, making the Ethiopian Bible not just a collection of religious texts, but a living document of the country's cultural and spiritual journey. In addition to the additional books, the Ethiopian Bible is written in the ancient language of Ge'ez, which adds to its significance. Ge'ez is one of the oldest written languages still in use for religious purposes today, and it holds an important place in Ethiopian liturgy. The use of Ge'ez in the Bible means that for centuries, Ethiopian Christians have been able to read and understand their holy texts in their native language, preserving a direct connection to their religious heritage. Ethiopia's religious history is also a testament to the resilience of its people. Despite invasions, both internal and external, Ethiopia managed to preserve its unique Christian identity. During the Islamic expansion in the 7th century, Ethiopia was one of the few Christian strongholds in Africa. Even as Western colonial powers sought to impose their own versions of Christianity during the 19th and 20th centuries, Ethiopia remained steadfast in its commitment to its ancient traditions and the Ethiopian Orthodox faith. The country's historical role as a bastion of Christianity in Africa allowed it to resist the colonization efforts that affected much of the continent. The Ethiopian Bible, as the central religious text for millions of Ethiopians, is an essential part of this story. Its preservation throughout Ethiopia's tumultuous history speaks to the strength and determination of the Ethiopian people. Even when faced with external threats and political turmoil, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church continued to protect its sacred texts. The Bible's survival through centuries of war, conflict, and even attempts at destruction by outside forces highlights its importance not only as a religious book, but also as a symbol of Ethiopia's enduring independence and cultural pride. Details about the books and reasons for their banning. The Ethiopian Bible stands apart from other Christian Bibles not only because of the additional books it contains, but also because of the theological and historical narratives these books offer. While the King James Bible and other widely recognized Christian texts contain 66 books, the Ethiopian Bible boasts a total of 88. This difference is not merely a matter of additional writings. The Ethiopian Bible contains ancient texts that offer unique perspectives on biblical history, many of which were rejected or lost by other Christian traditions. These books hold significant religious, historical, and cultural importance, making the reasons for their exclusion from the broader Christian canon particularly complex and controversial. Among the most well-known additional books in the Ethiopian Bible is the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text that explores the story of the fallen angels and the origins of evil. In the Book of Enoch, readers encounter a richly detailed narrative about the Watchers, angels sent to earth who fall from grace and take human wives, producing a race of giants known as the Nephilim. The story goes on to discuss the corrupting influence of these beings and the eventual judgment they face. The Book of Enoch was regarded by early Christians as an important text, cited in the New Testament by the apostles and revered for its apocalyptic prophecies. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, however, continues to include it in its canon, holding it as an essential part of its scriptural heritage. The rejection of the Book of Enoch by other Christian denominations can be seen as a deliberate effort to suppress these teachings, perhaps due to their controversial nature or their challenge to the more mainstream interpretations of sin and divine judgment. Another significant text in the Ethiopian Bible is the Book of Jubilees, often referred to as the Lesser Genesis. This book retells the history of the world from creation to the giving of the law, emphasizing the importance of observing the Sabbath and maintaining purity in religious practice. The Book of Jubilees offers an alternative account of biblical history, including more detailed genealogies and a specific focus on the covenant between God and the people of Israel. It also emphasizes the idea of restoring the true calendar to align humanity's worship with divine order. While the Book of Jubilees is included in the Ethiopian Bible, it was excluded from the broader Christian canon by the early church due to its theological and liturgical implications. It presents a different understanding of time, cosmology, and divine law, challenging the standard biblical texts that had become entrenched in early Christianity. The Book of Tobit, another key text in the Ethiopian Bible, is a narrative that tells the story of Tobit, a righteous man who is struck by blindness and faces numerous trials and tribulations. Throughout the book, Tobit exemplifies faith and piety in the face of adversity, and the story culminates in his healing through divine intervention. Tobit's piety and righteousness are also linked to the importance of almsgiving, marriage, and the observance of Jewish laws. This book was long included in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and was accepted by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as part of its canon. However, Tobit, along with other deuterocanonical texts, was excluded from the Protestant Bible during the Reformation. The rejection of these books can be seen as a political move, as Protestant reformers sought to distance themselves from what they viewed as extra or non-canonical texts that had not been accepted by early Jewish authorities. The absence of Tobit and similar texts in Protestant Bibles marks a significant theological shift, one that would impact the way Christianity developed in Western Europe and eventually the Americas. The Gospel of Bartholomew is another text unique to the Ethiopian Bible. This gospel is attributed to Bartholomew, one of the 12 apostles, and offers a different account of the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. Unlike the canonical Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospel of Bartholomew focuses on the mystical and supernatural aspects of Jesus' ministry. It discusses in depth the miracles performed by Jesus and the divine wisdom he imparts to his followers. The Gospel is also notable for its portrayal of the apostles as active participants in the ministry and for its themes of salvation and resurrection. The inclusion of this Gospel in the Ethiopian Bible further illustrates the differences between Ethiopian Christianity and the Christianity that developed in Europe and the Mediterranean. These books, Enoch, Jubilees, Tobit, and Bartholomew, are just a few examples of the texts that make the Ethiopian Bible distinct. But the question remains, why were these texts banned or excluded from most other Christian Bibles, especially those that came to dominate in Europe and the Americas? The answer lies in the complex and often politically charged history of early Christian church councils, theological disputes, and the consolidation of religious authority. One of the most significant historical events influencing the exclusion of these books was the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. This ecumenical council, convened by Emperor Constantine, sought to establish a unified Christian doctrine in the Roman Empire. Among the issues debated were the nature of Christ, the structure of the Church, and the content of Christian scripture. The council did not specifically address the question of which books should be included in the New Testament canon, but it did set a precedent for later councils and decisions that would determine which texts were deemed orthodox and which were considered heretical. As Christianity became more institutionalized, texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, which offered alternative views of biblical history, were marginalized because they did not fit with the growing power structures of the Church. The rejection of these books by the early Church also had much to do with the increasing centralization of religious authority in the hands of the Roman Catholic Church. As the Church consolidated power, it sought to control the religious narrative and define which texts would form the foundation of Christian belief. The books included in the Ethiopian Bible, many of which offered a different interpretation of biblical events, were seen as a challenge to the authority of the Church. Additionally, these texts were associated with early Jewish traditions that were not fully accepted by the Christian establishment. As the power of the Catholic Church expanded throughout the Middle Ages, the Ethiopian Bible's inclusion of these extra books became a source of tension. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, however, remained steadfast in its tradition, continuing to include these texts in its liturgy and teachings. The continued use of the Ethiopian Bible, with its additional books, highlights the deep theological and cultural divide between Ethiopia and the Western Christian world. Political and religious intervention. The banning of the Ethiopian Bible is not just a religious issue. It is deeply rooted in political and religious intervention, with centuries of foreign influence shaping the fate of this sacred text. The Ethiopian Bible, with its additional books and unique theological perspectives, posed a challenge to the Christian doctrines of Western powers, especially during the era of European colonialism. The Church, a central institution in Ethiopian society, became a target for those seeking to impose their own religious and political agendas on Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian Bible, as its cornerstone, suffered as a result. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, European colonial powers such as Italy, Britain, and France began to exert significant influence on Ethiopia. During this period, there was a concerted effort by European powers, through both missionary activity and colonial rule, to control the religious landscape of Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, with its centuries-old traditions and sacred texts, stood as a powerful symbol of Ethiopian identity and resistance against colonial encroachment. As a result, the Ethiopian Bible, specifically its deuterocanonical texts, became a target of foreign missionaries and colonial authorities who saw it as an obstacle to their efforts to dominate Ethiopia's religious practices. The primary reason for this intervention was the difference in the religious texts used by Ethiopia compared to the versions of the Bible accepted by Western Christian denominations. The Ethiopian Bible's inclusion of books such as the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Gospel of Bartholomew was seen by Western missionaries and scholars as heretical. These texts, not found in the Protestant or Catholic Bibles, presented an alternative view of biblical history that diverged from the established narrative of Western Christianity. European powers, particularly the Catholic Church, viewed the Ethiopian Bible as a threat to their religious authority and sought to suppress its use within the country. The Vatican, during the 16th and 17th centuries, was particularly focused on expanding Catholic influence in Africa, and Ethiopia, with its ancient Christian traditions, was seen as a key target. Despite Ethiopia's long history of Christianity, the Catholic Church, along with Protestant missionaries, aimed to replace the Ethiopian Orthodox Church with their own forms of Christianity. In this context, the Ethiopian Bible's additional books were often labeled as apocryphal or false, and efforts were made to remove these texts from the religious life of the Ethiopian people. The political dimension of this religious intervention became especially clear during the era of Italian colonialism. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Italy invaded Ethiopia in a bid to expand its empire in Africa. The Italian occupation, which lasted from 1936 to 1941, was marked by efforts to control Ethiopia's religious institutions and impose Italian ideals on the Ethiopian population. The Italian authorities sought to weaken the Ethiopian Orthodox Church's power, which was closely tied to the country's identity and resistance to colonial rule. As part of this strategy, the Ethiopian Bible and its sacred texts were marginalized. Italian authorities tried to suppress the use of Ge'ez, the language of the Ethiopian Bible, in favor of Italian and Latin. The Church's influence was also targeted, with the Italian occupiers attempting to replace Ethiopian clergy with their own Catholic priests. The Ethiopian Bible, which was a symbol of Ethiopia's Christian heritage and national pride, became a focal point of this religious and political struggle. For the Italian colonialists, controlling the Ethiopian Bible was seen as a way to undermine the power of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and, by extension, weaken the resistance against their colonial ambitions. In addition to direct political and military interventions, the Ethiopian Bible was also subject to more subtle forms of suppression by Western missionaries. Protestant and Catholic missionaries sought to replace the Ethiopian Bible with their own versions of the Christian scriptures. They criticized the Ethiopian Bible for its extra books and its divergence from Western Christianity, arguing that these texts were not divinely inspired. The missionaries' goal was not just to convert Ethiopians to Christianity, but also to reshape the religious identity of the country to align with Western theological views. Throughout this period of political and religious intervention, Ethiopia's leaders and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church fought to protect their religious traditions. The Church kept the Ethiopian Bible intact, even as foreign powers sought to impose their religious and political agendas. The Ethiopian people, deeply connected to their faith and the unique texts of their Bible, resisted these efforts. The Ethiopian Bible became not just a religious text, but a symbol of resistance, a reminder of Ethiopia's sovereignty and independence in the face of external threats. The resistance to the foreign intervention surrounding the Ethiopian Bible reached its peak during the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie. Known for his advocacy for African independence, Haile Selassie was a staunch defender of Ethiopia's Christian heritage and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. He worked to maintain the Church's autonomy and to protect the sacred texts of the Ethiopian Bible from the pressures of Western influence. His reign marked a period of renewed pride in Ethiopian culture and religion, and the Ethiopian Bible remained a central pillar of Ethiopian identity.